Hey, and we're going live here too, man. So, Dr. Bryan Keith, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, dude. How's it going today?
Good. Is it kind of cool to be able to be called doctor?
Honestly, I don't. It kind of. I don't like to be called doctor. I don't know why. I guess because I'm not a typical real medical doctor. But my mom, dad, they tell me like, "Hey, you earned it, so let people call you that if they want to." But I would never force it on anyone. So.
Understood. Understood. You couldn't be me, man. If I work in and get my doctorate in anything, I'm like Doctor Meister
Yeah.
Jones.
Well, my grandmother keeps me humble. As soon as I got my degree, first thing she said wasn't congratulations. It was, so when are you going to be a real doctor? I was like that
Ooh,
one stung a little bit.
grandma throwing a lot of shade at you.
That's her, man. That's her.
Gotta
But
love them.
you gotta love them for sure.
So what do you do? Like, how do you help
Mhm.
basketball players and athletes and adults in general?
Yeah, so I am a physical therapist. I label myself as a performance physical therapist, and a lot of people don't really know what a physical therapist offers. So essentially, I just tell people, hey, I'm a movement provider. You go to your medical doctor, they prescribe some type of medication intervention to treat a disease or diagnosis. And I just give you exercises to do to manage risk as it accompanies your activity, your lifestyle, whatever it is you're trying to do. So really just trying to help people move better, feel better, and then from the athletic side, perform better as well. And then
Got
physical
it.
therapy is just the platform that I deliver those services through. That's where the knowledge comes from.
Got it. I kind of want to jump right into it, man. We talk about
Hmm.
your quote. First off, can you tell everyone your quote that you always, when you come to our training sessions, you start out with this?
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah, and I should preface this and say I did not come up with this quote. I stole it from somebody. I wish I could give them credit, but as an athlete, your best ability is availability. We spend a lot of time, and rightfully so, working on all of these skill developmental processes to run faster, jump higher, move better, which is in and of itself perfect. That's necessary. But if your body is not sustaining that workload and you're not available because you're hurt, you're in pain, you're injured, it really doesn't matter. So trying to get athletes, especially younger kids, adolescents, and really parents, understand that and how important that process is, comes with its fair share of obstacles. But yeah, your best ability is availability. You could look at Anthony Davis on the Lakers, arguably a top five basketball talent, depending on who you talk to, but he has some issues with being available, right? So there's something to be said about resiliency and not getting injured, not getting hurt.
What do you tell? Because right now we're going into the fall, school starting back, and it's the off season for some, and some are never off season. Really, you think about AAU, fall
Mm-hmm.
basketball, fall league basketball, winter sports. What
Yep.
do you tell those athletes who are never out of season, and especially the ones who play two sports at once? How do you help them?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the parents and educating them on the higher rate of injuries with overuse related injuries, because we know that most injuries are overuse in nature. It's not a traumatic issue where you twist and cut and tear your ACL. It's an overuse issue where your ankle's fatigued and you have an ankle sprain, or you have jumper's knee because your patellar tendon is being overworked and you just haven't rested adequately. There's tons of models where you're looking at the fitness fatigue, or whatever the case may be. But rest is equally important for recovery. So sometimes it's really not a matter of your child or an athlete overtraining. They're just under recovering. And if we take the world's best at the most elite level, who have the best intangibles, the best skill sets, if they have off seasons and they have prepared and strategic planned rest periods, then your 13 to 18-year-old child, or whatever the case may be, should should also too take some type of rest. That could be a 6 to 8 week rest. It could be a summer rest. It could be a sports season rest. I'm not sure. I'm just not so sure that playing multiple sports and playing travel ball and never having a week off is the solution. I think less is more sometimes.
How do you gauge how long? You said a week just now, but how do you gauge? Does rest mean nothing, completely nothing off your feet, or does it mean light jogging, shooting, some kind of activity? How do you gauge how much rest one
Yeah, I
should
think
have?
that's a tremendous question. To me, rest for an athlete would be non-competitive uh, participation. So no
Mm,
5-on-5 if it's a basketball player, no travel ball, no high school games. You can still work on your individual skill development, ball handling, shooting, that sort of thing, and you can even do your strength and conditioning. But the playing, repetitively without addressing these other pillars and factors that make the playing possible is the big issue. And I do think it's good for everyone, me, you included, especially the older we get. Like, there should be periods where you don't do anything. You take true rest, where you're not going to condition, you're not going to do anything. You're truly resting. Sit on the couch and watch Netflix.
hmm I like that. So you said rest is non-competitive participation, right?
That's how I would define rest for most of these kids. And obviously it can be individualized, a case by case basis, but there needs to be some season of that. Yes.
What and when you're I'm imagining, let's say an athlete's going hard, they take a week off, they go back to it, and they're playing volleyball, they're playing basketball. What do you suggest they do in the interim after practices? Should they be stretching? Should they be doing the movement activity that you've done for our trainees? Should they be doing that after they finish their exercise, before they finish? What does
Yep.
that look like?
Yeah. So this is really a new age concept, but I think a solid strength program is the vehicle that makes everything possible. Like, strength is the foundation for injury risk reduction. It's the foundation for performance. So having a solid strength program, even in season, is super beneficial. You see the NBA guys where they're doing strength sessions, and you talk to elite strength coaches and they're doing morning weights on game day. So these guys are lifting weights before a game, which 10 years ago, you would have been labeled a lunatic for having an athlete do that. Now, obviously, not every athlete needs to be doing that, but I think having a strength program where, even if it's just 2 to 3 days a week, a 30-minute session is super, super important. And within that strength session, you could prioritize different individual constraints and limitations based on the athlete. They might need a little extra mobility work. They might need a little extra recovery work. They might need a little extra upper body strength, leg strength, whatever the case may be. But I think a strength program is the ticket there. I really do.
Got it. And when you do that, I've worked with other sports performance coaches, and they have a lot of weights. It's more like you said around mobility than it is flexibility. And I'm sure stretching comes into play here. But
Yeah.
what would you say? Do you need weights to do something like this? If you're talking about a middle schooler, an elementary schooler, even a high schooler, do you need weights to do this?
It would be ideal, because you need that overload stimulus to create that adaptation. But you can get a pretty gnarly workout with just body weight stuff and just working on more movement patterns and control, where you're looking at pelvis, hip, knee, and ankle, and how those four areas kind of coordinate movement efficiently and optimally. So I think if they didn't have weights, that's where I would just say, hey, let's slow things down and let's work with time under tension, because that's a great underutilized variable that we can use to get people stronger in the absence of kettlebells, barbells, weights. But if I had my choice, absolutely, I want a dumbbell, a barbell, a kettlebell, some stuff, some tools for the job to use.
Got it. And where does stretching come into play with this too? We're talking more flexibility than mobility, but where does stretching come into place with all this?
Yeah, yeah. If an athlete doesn't have the necessary mobility, and what I mean by mobility is the ability to get from one end range to another of a given joint or a muscle. If they don't have that, then we know that our injury risk goes way, way, way up, and we're going to be loading stuff a little bit abnormally. So I think mobility is probably the foundation for a lot of these things. The issue comes when we overemphasize mobility and we underemphasize strength and stability. The reality is that most of these kids are going to have the mobility that they need in their ankle and their hips, just because they're active and they're young and they're healthy. It's the overutilization of mobility that becomes the issue, but it's still very, very important. If you think of a slingshot, you have to be able to pull that rubber band back far enough to shoot whatever it is you're trying to shoot to produce force optimally. So if you can't get to that end range because you can't elongate enough, then that's a problem, and having an accurate, detailed assessment can really help tease those out. So I think stretching is important, but it's not more important than strength. No.
Got it. So if we're doing a workout, let's say 60 minutes, what portion of that is mobility and maybe like ankle mobility and hip mobility versus actually strengthening? Because you actually helped me out to realize, oh, I can't really make my hip flexor more flexible. I can make it stronger.
Correct.
There's some other myths that you kind of debunked that I've always thought, but what portion of that workout is mobility versus strength?
Yeah, generally, I think the first 10 to 15 minutes needs to be general movement preparedness, where you're getting the heart rate up and you're working on isolated joints, being able to mobilize and move properly. And then I think if you had another solid 30 minutes to go through the more intense accessory movements and compound movements, and then maybe a quick mobility session at the end for 10 minutes, so you could say it's almost 50-50. I think it's probably more 70-30, of that 60-minute time period needs to be strength and tension-based exercises. But I think getting the athletes ready to move with mobility work is important. So sharpen the axe before you cut the tree down. So it's important still.
Got it. And how do you explain to parents when, I'll be honest, for me and for parents, how do you gear the conversation and the dialogue around performance, improving performance, and not just preventing injury? Because I think most parents think they're not hurt, they're good, maybe some aches and pains, but that's typical for an athlete. How do you help them realize, no, this is going to actually help with performance?
Yeah, it's necessary. You have to connect the dots. And I was the same way. I'm sure you're the same way. Like injury prevention, injury reduction doesn't sound as appealing as jumping higher, running faster, performance, but the same qualities and characteristics that keep your child or an elite player at the highest level, those performance qualities and characteristics are the same qualities and characteristics that will keep them healthy from an injury perspective, so getting parents to understand that is super important. And as much as we want to, we want to think that your body can process physical therapy, rehab differently than performance, strength, and conditioning. It really can't. Your body does not know the difference. The only difference is the only difference is like the starting point. In one, you're starting with decreased range of motion or higher levels of sensitivity and some pain. But the goal is still progressive overload over time. You're trying to get stronger. You're trying to progress and adapt over time. It's really just the starting point that changes. And I think
explain that again, if you don't mind. Like your body doesn't know the difference between physical therapy work and the strength and conditioning, the performance work. Break that down for me again, please.
Right. So when you load your body, so let's say I'm doing a back squat with 100 pounds, your body doesn't know if your intent is you're doing rehab because you have knee pain or if you're trying to increase your vertical. Your body doesn't understand what it is you're trying to do. It just processes that load through the central nervous system and then gives you the desired output that you want. The body is a lot smarter than we could ever be. We just have to understand what to give it at a given time. So, the rehab, performance, it's this continuum. It's all the same thing. It's just the starting point that differs. The goal, the platform, how those interventions are laid out. It's all the same. It really is.
I like that. The rehab and performance are similar, just a starting point that differs for the purpose of what you're doing, the intent behind it. Your body doesn't know that initially, but we know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And okay, go ahead. Sorry.
It's bonus when you have these sessions with athletes and you can mix and dabble different, I guess, pillars of performance or rehab or injury prevention, whatever you want to call it. And you can mix them together, and the athlete doesn't really know the difference. They think they're working on leg strength, but you're working on, foot capacity because they have a history of ankle sprains, like they don't know the difference either. So you can trick them.
Got it. That's really interesting. And it just makes me think of the fine line between the sports performance coaches, the personal trainers versus the physical therapists. Like it's almost like one, and I don't want to compare coaches here, but it's almost like one side has a duality behind what they're doing and they know what that duality is, while the other side is solely geared towards what they think is performance, but one
Yep.
side of the performance,
Correct.
and
Correct.
it may have some benefits to it, but they don't always understand and aren't always able to articulate what those benefits are. Just from my perspective, I could be wrong, but that's what it feels like.
No, absolutely. And I think it's so important for everyone to be on the same page. That's where that communication piece comes into play. I think we've gotten a lot smarter in the sports science and medical world, when it comes to management of athletes, it's kind of a disservice that athletes in the years prior didn't have this access to the resources and knowledge that they do now. But you're seeing players now play well into their late 30s and early 40s, so back in the day, that just was not possible. And that's just because of the advances in science and data, and we're just smarter with how we manage athletes,
Right. Question around specialization. Does playing multiple sports, I'm sure you read studies on this, does that
Mhm.
help reduce the chances of injury? Of course, there's acute injuries and things that happen that are, uh, I guess, accidental, but
Yeah.
does that help reduce injury?
Simple answer, yes. Yes, it does. I think if I back up, you could ask that question. You see all of these elite athletes and they say, oh, they played football and baseball and basketball in high school, and that's why they're an elite athlete. But I think it's also fair to ask the question, did they play multiple sports just because they are an elite athlete? It's independent of the sports they play. They're just a gifted athlete, so they played many different things. But I think if you look at golf, for example, we're rotating a whole lot. Even baseball, we're getting a lot of rotation. You don't really get that in basketball per se necessarily, where you're running straight forward, you're running in circles, you're running left and right. You're not necessarily rotating through your midline like you would. There's also different levels of hand-eye coordination and demands on the foot, hip, knee, and ankle that you get from one sport that you don't get from another sport. So I think there are different characteristics and qualities that is necessary for both skill development and injury risk reduction that you just can't get from playing one sport all of the time. So I do think that specialization kind of isn't always a good idea, especially for younger athletes. I think the younger the athlete, then specialization is it should not be as, I guess, pushed by parents, coaches, players.
What age range or what are the factors that go into considering when an athlete should specialize? I've heard junior year, I've heard freshman year. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't do it any earlier than freshman year. I think that's like the cutting point. But I still think it's a case by case basis. If your child is very, very gifted and you think they do have a future, at the next level, then specialization probably makes a little bit more sense. But still, you talk to a lot of recruiters and a lot of coaches, they don't want you to specialize. They want you to get these characteristics from other sports that maybe your best sport just doesn't have to offer. But if I had to put just a hard cap on it, I would say no specialization before the age of 15. That's to me seems like an age where your child is still going through the developmental process. They have a little bit of more coordination and movement skill, just based off their biological age, and they've been exposed to a lot of different things. So I think 15 is kind of like a generic number to say specialization, no specialization.
That's good. And wrapping up with maybe two more questions in case, unless obviously I can talk a lot and ask questions. You've helped quite a few of our trainees. What are the most common injuries that you're seeing that you're helping them with?
Yeah. So when we talk injuries, we have to break that down into two categories. You've got traumatic injuries, those are things like ACL tears, meniscus tears, where someone hits your knee caves in, or you cut, pivot, and something happens immediately. And then you've got these overuse injuries, which are much more common. And in basketball, the most common areas are knees, ankles, and feet. Sometimes you'll get a hip. Obviously, you can have upper extremity issues, but for the basketball athlete, it's the knee, the foot, and the ankle. So ankle sprains being the most common. Outside of those traumatic knee injuries like ACL and meniscus, it's always the patellar tendinopathy, or like jumper's knee, where that anterior knee pain over the patellar tendon really hurts. And then you have other issues like Achilles tendonitis or plantar fasciitis that aggravates a lot of these players. So you got to take care of the wheels. That's what I tell people. Like the force that you're trying to play this game goes through your feet. So if you're not taking care of your feet, then you're doing a huge disservice to everything else upstream: your knee, your hip, your pelvis, everything starts at your feet. That's your base. So I think I always start my assessment and my training at the feet for a basketball athlete.
Interesting. And let me ask you this: there's so many things now. You got companies and those who help with stretching and flexibility. You've got those who speed up ice baths. I'm simplifying it very, very much. When you talk about cryotherapy, you've got people who help with movement and injury reduction, injury prevention. You got skill specific people who help. There's so many things. Chiropractors who help with alignments. There's a lot of stuff that are offered for the athlete. For you, what would it look like for a high school athlete? You remember how it is to be in high school and to be in college, to have homework and everything else going on and actually have a life. What would the ideal package look like for a high school athlete, whether it's just basketball specific and then the physical therapy, the movement training? What does that look like? What's the ideal structure for that athlete in terms of taking care of their body?
Yeah, I think, are we talking off season or in season here?
Honestly, kind of both. Like right now, we're in that off season period where they're going to start ramping up and doing conditioning and really get into the most intense time physically and conditioning wise.
Yeah, if we're talking like serious athlete, or really just an athlete that's looking to improve their game and they have the time to devote to it, I think 5 days a week is plenty, and having maybe 2 sessions per day. I don't know that 3 sessions per day is necessary, where one, you're working on the skill development stuff, like the stuff that you offer and that you do, where you're improving your game. And then another session where you're taking care of your body, you're taking care of your investment, whether that's recovery or a strength session or a motor control session where you're working on drills. That to me seems like the best way to structure that. And obviously with your skill development, you could structure that into a couple smaller sessions where you have a ball handling session and a shooting session. That really doesn't matter. That's where your expertise comes into play. But I think you have to put just as much emphasis on taking care of your body as you do taking care of your game, taking care of those skills. And you see now, LeBron James, I hate to use professional athletes because I know we're not talking to professional athletes, but I like to use them as an example because they do it. So if they're doing it, it makes sense that maybe we should look at their patterns of behavior and utilize their methods as well. But they're investing millions of dollars into their health and their body because they know that's their greatest asset. Without their body, they're not going to be able to compete and perform. So I think 5 days a week, 2 sessions a day, one skill development, one PT, strength and conditioning type stuff in the off season. And then during the season, I think 2 to 3 sessions per week of that taking care of your body is a happy medium. And it doesn't have to be an hour and a half, 2 hour session. That's kids going to school. They've got practice. They've got games. That's pretty naive of us to think that they have the time and capacity to do that. It could be a 20 to 30 minute session, after practice, before school, 2 to 3 times a week. That's an extra hour out of their week. I think we can squeeze that in somewhere. And if we had the ability to trace these variables over time, and we put kids in 2 different groups, you got one group that prioritizes their body, the other group does not prioritize their body. I promise you, over the course of 6 weeks to 6 months, the group that prioritizes their body, you're going to see less injury rates. You're going to see better performance. You're going to see all of these different factors that just shows how valuable this is to people. Does that kind of answer that question?
It does really well. 5 days a week during the off season, some kind of strength and also skill specific, and then in season maybe 2 to 3 days per week, but breaking it down to where it doesn't have to be an hour every single time. 20 minutes each workout compounded over the course of 6 weeks or 6 months makes a huge difference when you start to add it together. Right.
Yep.
Right. So I appreciate it. Well, so if anyone has an athlete who wants to help reduce their chances of injury, and maybe they have been injured with some kind of traumatic experience and they need your help, where can they find you and learn more about Myomuv?
Yeah. So my business is Myomuv. That's MYOMUV, kind of a weird name. But my best way to contact me is through my email, and that's Bryan, BRYAN @myomuv.com. And then social media, it's just Myomuv. That's Facebook and Instagram. You can access me there as well. Those are the 2 easiest places to kind of see what I'm all about, to get in touch with me. Website is myomuv.com. Put up pretty much bi-weekly blogs and educational content, so you can kind of keep up with us there. So really just trying to help people maximize the one body that they do have, and have a special place in my heart for the basketball athlete. Just a very, very, very big fan of the game. So anything I can do to give back for someone that's trying to compete and perform at the highest level, I would love to help you.
Okay. Hey, I know we got some talking to do later on about how we can work together and combine to help these athletes out. So I'm looking forward to solidifying some of those plans. I'm typing down your information here in the comments so that people can look at it later, and hopefully that somebody will reach out with some need that you can serve.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you for what you're doing and having me on the podcast. I think I always take something special away from every interaction we have, and I love the platform that you have and kind of what you're doing locally with the athletes, and then also in the community. I think super inspiring to see what you're doing. It's motivating. I know that. So.
Hey, you started to motivate me too, man. I see you're serious on this content game. So I'm like, I got to step my game up, man. He's doing it. So thank you.
Iron sharpens iron, or so they say. So.
Oh yeah. I believe that. So, hey, thanks again, man, for doing this. And again, whenever you get a chance, get back to me with any of that information on how we can make this work for the athletes. I'm looking forward to it.
Totally, man. We'll chat soon. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Take care.
You too. Hey, that was Dr. Bryan Keith of Myomuv. Hope you guys enjoyed listening to this, whether you're listening now. If you're listening later, go ahead and type in the comments replay. I would like to see what time everybody starts to listen to these types of interviews. I've got many, many more people that I want to talk to, from chiropractors, from those who support with cryotherapy, from those with physical therapy, from sports performance coaches, a lot of people that I would like to talk to that ultimately help your athlete. So if you guys can click on or type in replay in the comments, and in the comments, I will also include Bryan's contact information so you can reach out to him and learn more about what he does and the educational content that he provides for free, so you can help your son or daughter be safer and continue playing the game that they love. So thank you guys again. And thank you for all the birthday wishes. If you guys are a part of that crew that has wished me a happy birthday, I will get back to those messages soon. Just got right back into work mode. So thanks, guys. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.